The Artcast Foundry in Georgetown, Ontario, Canada has 40 years' experience in casting sculptures. The foundry uses the lost wax process, an ancient art believed to have originated in Egypt over 6,000 years ago. While the technology has improved over time, the finished product is much the same. The lost wax process creates an intricately detailed bronze sculpture that's built to last. Today, Canadian sculptor Stuart Smith arrives at the foundry to check on his latest work. He meets with manager Marcus Knospel to discuss how the bronzing of his sculpture is progressing. The casting stage is nearly complete, and Smith needs to ensure all is going according to plan. A lot is riding on this finished product. The sculpture is of a team that captured a nation's attention, a duo that made their country and the world take notice of a sport that had often been ignored. The sculpture is of legendary Canadian show-jumping champions, Ian Millar and Big Ben. 10 years after their retirement as a team, and 6 years after Big Ben's death, the pair will be immortalized in bronze. The sculpture is destined for a park in Perth, Ontario, the place where their partnership took root and started to gel.
Well, here's Captain Canada, Ian Millar, the anchor of the Canadian.
Beautiful. Picture Canada. Way to go, Ian.
Big Ben's story began in Belgium.
Big Ben was yet 7 years old when we bought him, when we sold him. And at that moment we knew that he has enormous capacities. But my father said at that moment when he left, he had to get a good writer, an experienced writer, an intelligent writer.
That writer came along in 1983 in the form of Canadian Ian Millar.
I kind of sensed it right from the beginning. It would be as if you walked into a room full of people, and why is it within a few minutes you're standing talking to a certain individual, or why are you drawn to somebody? And it was a little bit the same thing when I walked into that barn and hall, and there he was on the cross ties. I was just drawn to him.
It was love at first sight, and the deal was done. I mean, it was probably the fastest deal I ever did in my whole entire life.
The deal to purchase Big Ben may have been fast and easy, but Big Ben's early days at Miller Brook Farm in Perth, Ontario were anything but.
Big Ben was amazing. From the moment he got here, he was in charge.
In the very beginning, he was a precocious, opinionated, difficult son of a gun for sure. I always feel that I trained him the way my wife Lynn trained me. She made me think it was all my idea. And that's how I trained Big Ben. I'd go through the whole process with him, and eventually he would select the option that I wanted, and he would really kind of think it was his idea.
Not even Ian could have predicted how well his training formula would work with Big Ben. At the Artcast Foundry, the statue of Big Ben and Ian Millar is starting to take shape. For artist Stuart Smith, it's been a 4-month journey to this point. In the beginning, the town of Perth came to Stuart with a request to create a sculpture of Big Ben and Ian Millar floating over a jump. Getting a 1,400-pound bronze horse to float was going to be a challenge. First, Stuart would have to find the perfect photo to base his creation on. After sifting through hundreds, he came across the one he'd use. The next step was to make the image three-dimensional. Stuart created a 14-inch model, then built the life-size version, which would be the foundation of the statue. Plywood and styrofoam were carved into the proper shape, and the entire surface was covered in sculptor's wax. The Canadian icons were starting to take shape.
That sense of history could have been daunting. And, and there's no reason why it wouldn't have been scary and daunting, but it wasn't. And I think it was because I felt this unqualified love and passion behind Big Ben and Ian Millar. that the whole job became a no-brainer. I looked for help, and help was there in an instant without qualification.
Stewart's biggest help came from fellow sculptor Ruth Abernathy and her sister Jean.
I just feel honored and blessed, and it's a tremendous privilege to be able to contribute and add value to this.
Jean was the equestrian expert amongst the group and worked painstakingly to get the details right.
Well, you can't afford to get it wrong in something like this, you know. The thing's going to be standing there 400 years, and so you don't want it standing there looking bad.
Stuart Smith even had Ian and Lynn Millar to his studio to make sure everything, including the position of the tack, was exact. The model then went to the art cast foundry where bronzing began. At the foundry, the sculpture was separated into small, workable pieces. A rock-hard shell was built around each piece of wax sculpture. Melted bronze was then poured into each shell. Once the shells were cool enough to handle, hammers and chisels exposed the freshly solidified metal. The pieces then went to the metal shop for cleaning. Any imperfections were fixed. Today, the pieces of the statue are complete and will be brought together for the first time. Ian Millar is lowered into place. Once again, the team is together as one.
235,000 years to win the Smirnoff Cup in a tournament.
Two-national champion.
Big Ben and Ian Millar appeared together for the first time on the international stage in 1984. From day one, people took notice of the pair.
I remember Big Ben as a big, rugged-looking gelding, 18 hands tall. Ian Millar, who is a great veteran, riding a horse that was somewhat different than the horses you'd typically seen him on. And Big Ben was all game.
The first thing that struck me about the horse was he was too big a horse. Very, very rarely do very, very big horses succeed in the sport of agility and quickness and whatnot.
It wouldn't take long for Big Ben to prove the doubters wrong.
He was incredibly smart, and people that deal with horses know that, and I mean it makes perfect sense that smart horses have more capabilities, but they're more difficult to train, you know, or to keep level. So the great thing about him is that he was smart and he had a huge heart.
Big Ben moved his way up the ranks at lightning speed, impressing everyone along the way. For such a large horse, he had amazing agility and skill.
Big Ben was set apart from all the other horses in my mind because he was this immense horse, massive, and yet on the field he was extremely cat-like and athletic.
He also learned to be an outstanding indoor horse and was as fast as any horse on the planet. And those were to a great extent learned skills, and which you wouldn't have expected a horse like that to do.
He learned to cut down the arc on a vertical, which I never saw a horse do, where he jumped the height and then shortened the arc on the backside of the vertical enough that he could almost skim it behind. Skills like that make champions in the world.
From the get-go, Big Ben was a champion in the making. It took him only a year to reach the top level of competition, a level which normally takes several years to achieve.
I was so excited about the talent of the horse, about the disposition, the power I felt when I rode him.
In his heart, he always wanted to do the right things. And when it was really important, his heart always said, I know how to do it and I know how important this is.
In 1986, Big Ben started his long, lasting ride at the top.
I think he was the type of horse from the very early going that knew what he wanted, and he waited for Ian to come into the equation. And then Ian was going to be the fella that he worked with to deliver the goods.
The pair started delivering the goods in their first Spruce Meadows Derby. The Chrysler Classic is one of the most difficult competitions in the sport of show jumping. The course is nearly a kilometer long with many demanding natural obstacles. Clear rounds are almost unheard of. Big Ben's power and scope were obvious to all who looked on in 1986.
The highest in show jumping anywhere.
Ooh, and the slip coming off the bottom. Can he get organized? He does it. Big Ben clears it. Good execution by Millar to get Big Ben balanced again to jump that jump, and he's through the devil's duck clear. Just 4 jumps left to go.
This could be our new leader.
He's through. This is going to be our new leader, but can he jump clear? He does it.
Big Ben and Ian Millar finished the course with no knockdowns and took home the trophy for an unbeatable performance. The 1986 Chrysler Classic win was the turning point, the point where Big Ben and Ian Millar never looked back.
They call him Captain Canada. He's really the ambassador of show jumping in Canada. Payday today, $21,000.
He had speed and agility, he had courage and boldness, and he had a ton of scope. He was the total package, and I don't think there's been more than 3 or 4 of them in the history of our sport.
In 1987, Big Ben and Ian Millar proved they were a force to be reckoned with. They kicked off their winning season during the summer tour at Spruce Meadows. Their sights were set on a second consecutive win in the Chrysler Classic Derby.
Possibly have a jump off. Well, we've seen Big Ben in operation all week, and we haven't seen knockdown of a single fence.
Ian did knock a fence down in 6 rounds in the World Cup Classic. Clear over the combination. Now the Spruce Meadows planks. Can he get Big Ben to jump?
Get ready.
There? And he makes it. We have a jump off. A wonderful class.
Their clear round advanced them to a jump off against fellow Canadian Laura Boliski. Boliski was the first to go with her horse Lavendel.
$21,500.
Clear over A, clear over B, coming to the red planks. And I tell you, she's put the pressure.
Boliski finished with a perfect round in a time of 39.83 seconds. Ian Millar and Big Ben had no choice but to go clean and fast.
Ian's got Big Ben opened up. He's going to try and beat this time. What do you think, Laura? I think
pretty quick. I think he's a little ahead of me here. He left one out there, but he's
didn't get the same turn as you there, Laura.
No.
You're ahead of him now.
Not quite as sharp.
39.83 is the time Ian has to beat. He took a much tighter turn there than Laura.
Over the Liverpools.
The big gelding proved his might. They crossed the finish line 2 seconds faster. With that performance, Big Ben and Ian Millar laid claim to their second consecutive title in the Chrysler Classic Derby. The victory put them in the Spruce Meadows record book as the only horse-rider combination with back-to-back wins in the event. In the fall of 1987, Big Ben and Ian Millar returned to Spruce Meadows, fresh off an individual and team gold medal win at the Pan American Games. They arrived at the Masters with one goal in mind. The Du Maurier International was the biggest payday in the sport, and Big Ben and Ian Millar were looking to take home the top prize. As everyone was quickly learning, when this pair focused, they were almost unbeatable.
He was so clever about things, and just at the last second he'd know how to shift his weight or shift his balance, move a leg, just do something to miss the rail.
Round 1 of the Du Maurier International. A rub in the triple combination nearly spelled disaster for Ben. They made it through the course clear and advanced to round 2. Big Ben gave it his all in the second round. He had unbelievable height over the triple this time. They finished clear and advanced to the jump-off. Germany's young Ludger Beerbaum was the first to go. Beerbaum went clear with a time that couldn't be beat until Ian Millar and Big Ben made their entrance.
When you saw him come through the clock tower, he seemed like he was 7 feet tall. And that's what you want to see in a show jumper, that when they come into a competitive ring and there's the crowd going wild, that they rise up to the occasion. And that's what Big Ben did, and so did Ian as well.
Big Ben and Ian Millar rose to the occasion in the 1987 Du Maurier International. They went clear in the jump-off and beat Beerbaum's time by nearly 7 seconds. Their goal of winning the most demanding Grand Prix in the sport was achieved. They were crowned champions of the 1987 Du Maurier International. Big Ben and Ian Millar solidified their position at the top of the sport, and they became the ones to beat for years to come.
Well, on behalf of my partner over there, the tall, slim chestnut, Big Ben, I'd just like to make a comment on career highlights. I was asked if this was a career highlight, and it sure is. He could do things that I never believed a horse could do. He had talents and skills and athletic abilities and mental capabilities that it never occurred to me a horse would have those. And that, of course, is what led to the amazing results.
Big Ben, it seemed, specialized in amazing results, a remarkable accomplishment given his tendency to be a bit skittish.
When he was outside the ring, he was determined that he hated and was petrified of black garbage bags.
I rode him and quite a bit, and again, a lot of conditioning work and things like that. And no, every time, yeah, he'd find something to spook at in the bushes or something, and no, that was definitely part of his character.
He could spook and he could move faster than anything I've ever seen in my life for such a big horse. But when he got in the ring, all those black garbage bags went away, and he'd look at the people, and I swear, he'd look at the other horses, and he'd just look down his nose a little bit, say, you know what, I'm gonna show you.
Ben certainly did show them. He and Ian became masters of the Spruce Meadows Derbies. After winning the Chrysler Classic 3 years in a row, they shifted their focus. In 1991, Big Ben and Ian Millar decided to dominate the Shell Cup.
Big wide oxers over water, and Millar does it. Our first clear round, he had 300.
They finished with a clear round and were the only ones to do so.
What a thrilling experience for the thousands on hand here at Spruce Meadows this afternoon. Ian Millar aboard Big Ben, a clear round in this $100,000.
Big Ben and Ian Millar took home the Shell Cup trophy, a scene that would be repeated for the next 2 years.
Well, it was very rare that Ben didn't do so well. I think I can remember once or twice a year he would have a rail down. Most of the time he was, right on form.
In the 1992 Shell Cup Derby, Big Ben and Ian Millar put in another picture-perfect performance. Once again, they completed the course with no knockdowns and rode away with the win.
It was probably one of the best matches in history of show jumping, I'd say. I don't know that that horse with another rider would have had the same career.
Ladies and gentlemen, the champion of the 1992 Shell Cup, Ian Millar, and his wonderful partner, Big Ben.
Big Ben and Ian Millar's partnership flourished through the years. They represented Canada in 3 Olympic Games, and Big Ben was ranked top horse in the world in 1987 and 1989. They represented Canada on over 30 Nations Cup teams and won more than 40 Grand Prix.
And also we'd like to salute Captain Canada, Ian Millar, and Big Ben.
They also made it in the record book for being the first partnership to win the World Cup finals 2 years in a row. First in Gothenburg, Sweden, then in Tampa, Florida.
Here it is, and there it is, and Ian Millar has done it! Ian Millar and Big Ben.
In 1991, Big Ben and Ian Millar had their eye on one prize in particular. They wanted a second win in the Du Maurier International Grand Prix. Since their initial victory in 1987, they'd attempted to repeat their win, but to no avail. This year, they would settle for nothing less than victory.
This one has caused so many problems. Come on, Ben! Within the time allowed.
Big Ben and Ian Millar made it through the first round clear.
With the second clear round of this afternoon in the Du Maurier Limited International.
Oh my gosh!
They were last to go in the second round. Nobody else had ridden both rounds without any knockdowns. If Big Ben and Ian Millar got through this clear, they would win the competition.
He's up as Ian Millar comes home for the final 2 jumps.
Come on, Ben! He does it!
Ian Millar and Big Ben.
$235,000 richer!
Our 1991 Du Maurier Limited International Champion.
A standing ovation from the crowd!
With this Du Maurier International victory, Big Ben and Ian Millar made it into another record book. They were the first duo to win this event twice in their career. Big Ben and Ian Millar had become the sport's superstars. They seemed to shine no matter what the event, no matter where the venue.
They were almost unbeatable and unstoppable. So everyone in the world was chasing them. And they set the benchmark and they raised the bar, and we all had to rise up to that. And that's pretty impressive.
Watching them clear round after clear round, and so cool. And with being such a huge horse, an enormous horse, and how he would handle the courses, long, short, fast, slow, really an inspiration, and one that you'd really run to the ring to watch.
Despite all the success Big Ben had in the competition ring, his career was full of challenges. He survived 2 colic surgeries and one horrific highway accident that claimed another horse's life. Each time, after each setback, Big Ben was stronger than ever.
He was such a strong character that the more things put him down, the more he got up and tried harder. It was a big game to him. He loved it every day of his life.
I think that he had an amazing career, and it seemed to go forever, really.
Big Ben's career at the top of the sport lasted an unprecedented 11 years. For all who went along, it was one surreal ride.
Big Ben showed me things that horses could do that I never believed they could do.
Individually, for each one of us, he would show us, you know, we're all together in this. But I'm still a boss.
Big Ben's ride eventually had to come to an end. It started to happen at one competition in particular when Ian noticed a change in Ben's behavior with Sandy.
And he was just standing there enjoying the nice sunny day. And normally he should have been nudging her with his head and trying to step on her and dancing around a little bit because he knew why he was there. But he wasn't. He was just hanging out. And I put it all together and I said, you know, Lynn, he's telling us it's time. It's time to step back.
He probably still would have happily been jumping for another couple of years, but you know what? It took too much out of him. It was time for him to just settle back because you would have gone to the end of his generosity. And as it turned out, it was the perfect time for him to retire.
The completed bronze statue of Ian Millar and Big Ben arrives in their hometown of Perth, Ontario. Marcus has taken leave of his duties at the foundry to travel with the statue. He wants to make sure the installation goes smoothly.
Oh, we measured it right. Yeah.
In a couple of days, the statue will be unveiled. The ceremony will take place at the conclusion of an entire day celebrating for the love of a horse, a day dedicated to the memory of Big Ben. In the meantime, the statue gets welded into place as everyone looks on.
Is the blaze right on his nose? Because we were told very specifically one of his most identifying features was the blaze, that it's more crisp on one side and fades up.
Yeah, I would say that's excellent.
Yeah, I'll let all the guys know, but they were really proud to be working on it.
Well, they got it just right. One of the owners of Ben is here this morning. He took one look at it and said, "That is Big Ben."
Those words are a welcome relief. Nobody wanted to get this monument wrong. Big Ben meant too much to too many people.
37,000 strong, and they know a Canadian legend when they see one.
You can talk to people in this country from coast to coast, from every walk of life, who may not know anything about international show jumping. And regardless of their age, most have heard of Big Ben.
Admiration for Big Ben seemed to blossom overnight. It was an unusual phenomenon. In Canada, national attention is usually reserved for hockey players. But there was something about this horse that captured the heart of Canadians early on.
We learned right off the bat that Ben was special. You know, we knew it for a long time, and the crowds would come to visit him all the time. I mean, there was never anywhere that we went that they weren't back in the barns coming to see him.
Big Ben was a big horse with big personality.
He had such a distinct personality, but he was always fair. If he didn't like something, he told you he didn't like it.
Big Ben was such a character, you know, just the way he handled himself, and he was a bit regal in his presentation, you know, right from the little children to the old ladies. You know, he would drop his head for a little kid, and yet if you walked up and turned the clippers on, he was out of there. So, I mean, he was many contradictions, that horse.
The crowds fell for that horse, contradictions and all. They loved him as the consummate performer, as the horse who gave it his all, the horse who fought for what he deserved. In return, Big Ben always put on a good show for those who watched and cheered.
He loved people clapping. They jump higher. There's quite a few videos of Ben jumping in this ring where the crowd starts clapping over the Devil's Dyke and he just jumps higher each time.
That is extraordinary to me because that would be the response of a human athlete, perhaps. But you wouldn't expect that of a horse. To make that association to a horse, you'd think, well, it's going to distract him. It didn't distract him at all. It just he appreciated it, and it made him better.
The better Ben got, the more attention he garnered, and even more Canadians were being exposed to this great gelding.
If you came to watch Grand Prix jumping in Canada, or you turned on your television to watch it, chances are Big Ben would be there, and the chances are he'd be in the top 3 every time.
It didn't take long for all media to tune in to Big Ben.
Because he had such a magnificent presence, he attracted the media even if they had no interest in horses. The curiosity factor brought many of the non-conventional media out to see, what's the story? What's the story about this ruggedly handsome gelding who, even if you know nothing about horses, you'd look up and go, impressive.
The media got to know him, and they'd come and say, "Hi, Ben," and they'd bring him a treat. And he seemed to enjoy that, and he'd love the cameras, and he was very tolerant of the whole thing.
The whole thing quickly took on a life of its own. There was a point where all the attention meant Canada could have lost Big Ben, a horse who was turning into a valuable national hero.
His ownership group, Canadian Show Jumpers Unlimited Incorporated, turned down some incredible offers for him. And they essentially made the decision that he would never be sold, which meant they were really giving him to all of Canada.
All of Canada cherished the gift, and some couldn't resist the opportunity to show their gratitude.
The most remarkable things would happen in a life with Big Ben when you're on the road with Big Ben. And a gentleman walked up to me at Spruce Meadows one day and said, "I painted this for you and Big Ben." And it's a feather with a picture, a little painting of Big Ben on it, jumping a jump. Now that's truly remarkable.
Remarkable things also started arriving for Big Ben at Millarbrook Farm.
In the house, I have a rug that's probably 12 feet by 12 feet, and it's crocheted, and it's a picture of Big Ben, and it's about when he won the Pan American Games in Indianapolis. And that just arrived in the mail one day from a lady from California.
Oh, it was a steady flow of, and things that people sent, you know what I mean? Like drawings or letters and children that, made these amazing posters, and the time and effort that went into the things that people sent was just, it blew all of our minds, I think.
Big Ben had a special connection with people. He transcended the sport totally. And he wasn't just a horse, he wasn't just a show jumper. He became a very important symbol to so many people. He touched so many people's lives, and they just remember him like it was yesterday, and with tremendous admiration, respect, and fondness.
The fondness for Big Ben was never more evident than during his retirement tour in 1994. He traveled across Canada, and thousands came out to say farewell.
When people would come to watch him jump or come to see him in the retirement tour, they were coming to see their own horse because he was theirs, he was Canada's.
Canada was not disappointed in what they saw during the retirement tour. At every stop along the way, Big Ben's personality was front and center.
Big Ben, he knew who he was dealing with all the time. He knew if it was a horseman around him that he could be a little different. He knew if it was a little child around, he could be a gentle giant.
This particular photo was taken at the Royal, and this young man was in a wheelchair and was being wheeled up to give Big Ben a basket full of carrots and bran muffins, which she really, really liked. And I was holding Ben, and I could see by the expression on the boy's face that he was quite apprehensive about being wheeled up to Big Ben. Of course, the person pushing the wheelchair didn't realize this. He wasn't happy, he wasn't comfortable at all, and I would say a little bit afraid. And all of a sudden, Ben plunged his nose down into the basket and started to munch on the muffins. And you can see the expression on the boy's face. And from that point forward, you couldn't get the young man away from Ben after. He wanted to spend the whole day with him.
It seemed everyone wanted to spend time with Big Ben. That was certainly the case during their final stop at Spruce Meadows. On the Sunday of the Masters in 1994, the entire stadium was packed.
It wasn't just Canadian fans. It was fans from all over the world, riders from all over the world. And when Big Ben came into the stadium to his signature song, it was really quite extraordinary.
The fans were very emotional about not being able to see, knowing that they wouldn't see Big Ben again. And it was special because you know, it's one of those times when you tingled.
It was so appropriate, and for Big Ben, he loved it.
After the retirement tour, Big Ben went home to live out his days at Millarbrook Farm.
His schedule didn't change a whole lot. We didn't just bring him home and say, okay, you're retired, now you're gonna go live outside. He wouldn't have been happy doing that. He still got ridden every day.
Even though he was retired, he was still part of the barn and the day-to-day work, and he was really like any other horse. And so it was really, even though he was retired, he was still kind of seemed to fit into everything.
And if he didn't get ridden by sort of 1 o'clock, he'd start banging the walls of his stall or shaking the bars with his teeth and say, come on, I need to get going, I want to get ridden. Thanks.
Big Ben approached retirement as he approached his career. He was a worker who wanted to work every day.
If I was riding around out there and there was a little jump, the ride for him wasn't complete unless we stepped over that jump a couple of times.
Listen to the crowd here at Spruce Meadows as they move on to the final fence.
He's got it! In under 80 seconds, Ian Millar and Big Ben win the Smirnoff Cup in a torrential downpour here at...
Throughout his 11-year career, Big Ben became a hero to Canadians and to the world. His fighting spirit endeared him to fans and competitors alike. But there was one fight Big Ben didn't win.
About 3 o'clock in the morning, Dr. Atex said, we have to euthanize, he's not going to make it.
On December 11th, 1999, Big Ben succumbed to colic.
The whole country registered it, and the condolences that poured in from around the world were very, very touching.
The Millar family worked all day to build a grave for Big Ben. The finishing touch was a bonfire surrounding his burial ground in the shape of a horseshoe.
The reason he's buried here is because it looks over the paddocks, where the fields where the horses are turned out. And I always felt that if Big Ben was here, he could maybe give them a little advice. And it sort of looks at the whole farm, and so in rest he can look around, keep an eye on things, so that's why he's here.
An overcast sky is not what organizers of For the Love of a Horse were hoping for. The concern is crowds will be small if bad weather persists. As the first bus arrives, it's clear nobody wants to miss this day. 6 years after Big Ben lost his final battle with colic, the love for the big gelding is alive and well. For the Love of a Horse was the brainchild of a group of community-minded Perth volunteers. The idea was to create a day around the unveiling of the Big Ben and Ian Millar statue.
It's so emotional, the bond that Ian had with Ben, and then that bond turned into a bond with Canadians. And that's really why we all got on board and did this thing.
The Millar family got on board by opening their farm so the public could visit the place Big Ben called home. The plan for the day just grew from there. busload after busload arrives. Close to 5,000 people have come to celebrate the amazing partnership of Ian Millar and Big Ben. There are activities for the whole family to enjoy. Entertainers perform around the property.
Ian Millar, welcome back into the Field of Dreams, riding his candidate for the Beijing Olympics.
Ian Millar, along with his kids Jonathan and Amy, give a show jumping demonstration.
Them at the far end of the ring. The Liverpool is the water obstacle.
Even the legendary RCMP musical ride has turned up to perform on Big Ben's training grounds.
I choke up a little bit because I can't imagine that when I look at the stands and I think about all those people that are going to be here, I can't imagine that he's not cantering around. That seems strange, because he would really, really like that, to have all these people at his farm.
People still want to meet Ian and talk to him about Big Ben. Many remember the great job the pair did every time they entered the ring.
Go, welcome.
He was a good representative of Canada, he and Ian Millar, and the winnings, but even if he didn't win, they always did such a wonderful job.
Others are filled with remembrance of the day Big Ben died.
Well, it was sad. I think everybody would just wish that the legend would go on forever and never end. So I guess, and it's always sad when I think everybody felt like he was their pet, because everybody knew him. So it was very sad.
Even fans who were too young to be around during Big Ben's career carry a love and admiration for the legendary horse.
He's like a hero. He's like, I don't know, he inspires me to ride more because I want to be a jumper, and I hope my horse gets to be as famous as him. He wanted to just keep doing it, and like some of the horses might just want to keep stopping, but he just had the spirit to keep going.
The Millarbrook Open House for the Love of a Horse comes to a close. Celebrations move to a park along the Tay River in Perth, Ontario. The statue is revealed. It's a moment to remember. Legends frozen in time. A perfect moment in their time. Together, floating. In the place where it began, the place where it ended.
It took me till I was grown up and probably he was gone to realize that he was really, really, really special, and that there wasn't going to be another one standing in the barn after he left.
I was thinking actually in Athens, the last day I was walking it, and I just stopped and I looked around and I thought, Big Ben, where are you? I need you, my friend.
Well, he was my special buddy. I certainly miss him every day. I know Ian misses him a lot, and I hope one day we have another one that Canada can love as much as they did for him.
Talk about blessed. I am the one that's really blessed to have known Big Ben.